Hi everyone, you're watching the Piano Teaching Podcast. This is episode 50 and I'm Tim Topham. Thank you so much for all your support over the last year and a half or so. And I'm so excited to say that we've actually made it to episode 50. How cool is that? And as I mentioned in the last episode, I do have a very special offer for all of you guys listening to the podcast. I would like to offer you all, as a little 50th birthday special, $50 off annual membership of my InnerCircle Piano Teaching Community. You've heard me talk a lot about this community and the people that are in it. You've met some of them on the podcast. You've probably read articles by them. The community is growing beautifully, and the kind of things that are going on there are just blowing my mind, really. It's really, really, really fantastic to see the creativity, in the innovation that's going on, and the fact that everyone is sharing all these ideas with everyone else. So I would love to have you in there. If you're a regular listener to the podcast and you are not a member yet, then I encourage you to take advantage of this offer, $50 off an annual membership. And you can grab that by using the code TTTV podcast, all one word, TTTV podcast, when you check out. So if you want to find out more, head to timtopham.com/community and you'll find out all the details. You'll be able to read about what you get, and you'll even be able to watch as one of the members interviews me and asks me some questions about teaching. Now, we've also got a number of other changes to the podcasts, as if you're on the show notes page today, you'll already have found out that we are now offering transcripts for these episodes. You may remember that I did a survey of all of you guys, and I got, 120 responses or something, which was fantastic. And one of the overarching things was when I asked about transcripts, everyone said, yes, please do it. We would love to be able to read them. So transcripts are now available. They're on the show notes page. You can just scroll down and just read, and you can search on your computer. Control F or Command F normally opens a search box if you want to search for a particular word or a link. If you want to download a PDF of it, you can just chuck your email in a box and you can actually get a PDF download of the transcripts. Now, I've also made a change to the videos. So videos now, if you would like to get a video, you'll need to use an email opt-in. However, if you are a member of my InnerCircle community, you get the PDF download of the transcript and access to all the videos instantly once they're uploaded in the InnerCircle members area. Let me be really clear though, if you are enjoying these podcasts, you don't need to become a member to listen to them, because they will always be free on iTunes or Stitcher or one of your favorite podcast apps on your phone. And you can always listen to the episodes completely for free with no opt-ins or anything like that on my website on the show notes page. So the show notes for this episode will be at timtopham.com/episode 50. And as always, if you've got a spare couple of minutes and have the time to leave a quick review on iTunes, I would thoroughly appreciate it. It would be great. It's the instructions are at timtopham.com/iTunes. So let me tell you about today's guest. It's Jo Burrows. Now, Jo I've known for a number of years. She's a teacher here in Australia, and she's also a composer, published by an Australian company called Wirrapeng. And today we're talking all about teaching patterns. And as you will know from some of the reading that you might already have done about music learning theory, which is the theme this month, a lot of the focus is on patterns. Now, Jo isn't a music learning theory teacher. However, she is a teacher that uses some of those concepts in her teaching. And so I wanted to get her on just to show you how aspects of these kind of approaches, and the same goes for Kadai, Dalcroze and everything, can be incorporated into lessons. You know, there's nothing stopping any of us from picking and choosing the best of what we see of all the approaches that are used for piano teaching around the world, or music education generally, and incorporating them into our lessons. So, and teaching by patterns is one of those things. So today we're going to talk about the kind of patterns that you can teach: rhythmic, left hand, and melodic, and how you can actually, while teaching those patterns, get students to actually use them and put them into context of playing music. So you're going to really, really love this. Jo has a number of fantastic books that she's written, which are all available for digital download, and they're all at 25% off for the next 2 or 3 weeks after this podcast goes live. And this podcast is going live just towards the end of July. So if you are interested in any of the things she talks about, we'll be giving you the link there, and the links are also in the show notes too. One of the best places to go is Wirrapeng, and also australiancomposers.com.au to find out more. So look, I know you're going to love this interview. I learned heaps from it, and I've been exploring her resources myself. I'm going to be doing a lot more pattern-based teaching. I know it works, and I know students enjoy it, and I know it's fantastic for their rhythmic skills. So here's my interview with Jo Burrows. So, Jo, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Tim. Glad to be here.
Well, it was so cool catching up with you again at the MTAQ conference in Brisbane last weekend. And I hadn't seen you for a couple of years and found out the latest things you're doing. I always knew you're a fabulous teacher, obviously, and a composer. But when you started talking about all this great improvising and pattern work you're doing, I thought, got to get you onto the podcast because this is exactly what we're talking about this month with regard to the music learning theory stuff. So before we get right into that, can you give everyone just a quick summary of the kind of teaching you're doing, or are you mainly composing at the moment? What does your day look like?
Oh, thank you, Tim. Well, I'm currently head of piano at the Riverina Conservatorium of Music. I have about probably 40 students. They range from beginner all the way through to A-Mus, L-Mus, and got a university student. And so I'm doing a range of different things. And I also do music craft theory lessons and secretly recorder on the side. So in between all of that...
We won't tell everyone about that. Oh, wait, it's already out.
And in between that, I am composing, but I have also just started my master's with CQU.
Right, fantastic.
So a lot of the work that I presented at MTA was in relation to the kind of things that I've been doing and then researching how that's playing out in teacher practice across Australia.
And this is what I love. Anything that's research-based, I'm there. And that's why this whole music learning theory stuff, which has all the research to back it, sits so well with me, even though I'm still learning how it all works myself and I'm still kind of working out how I can incorporate it. But when you put research behind something, it's like, why aren't we doing this?
That's right.
If we know it works. So anyway, let's talk today. My focus really is going to be about patterns. One of the key kind of features, as you know, of the music learning theory is use of patterns. And particularly students being able to audiate, so hear in their head and imagine the sound and be able to chant and verbalize and just know patterns. Now, I think I should probably say for all the music learning theory purists who might be watching this, I understand that Dr. Edwin Gordon, who came up with it, had a very specific set of patterns and ways of vocalizing sounds and things like that. So I realize that what we're talking about today might not fit that. However, I know that for a lot of teachers, completely revolutionizing everything they do to teach is not very, going to be the way that we go. So I'm really advocating a concept of, if this concept of learning about patterns is important and we realize that, then what are some of the ways we can incorporate it, even if we're not a fully trained and experienced music learning theory teacher? So that's what we're talking about today.
May I comment on that? I think it's really important that we constantly as teachers challenge ourselves, read, talk with other teachers and be informed so that we don't slip into religiously adhering to one particular kind of teaching because we have many kinds of students. So I think the pattern-based work I do anyway is one of the strategies in my arsenal of teaching. So I use it a lot. It usually works with every single student, but the way in which I use it may vary. How often I use it may vary, that sort of thing. Also, I think it's important to understand that there's lots of different kinds of patterns because there's rhythmic patterns, which I think are the biggest thing that students fail to internalise and learn to recognise because they don't count. There's, acoustic patterns in the right hand, melodic, fillers, left-hand patterns, which chordal-based, melodic-based. So there's a whole range of different patterns, and then patterns in the actual physicality of the movements.
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots. I'm going to try and cover each of those today in this conversation, which I'm really excited about. I might just get you. Are you able to angle your camera down a little bit? You're kind of on the bottom. Yeah, that's better. Oh, heaps better. Fantastic. Okay, so let's get into it. So we've kind of talked about these patterns. We know there's a lot of different types. Why is it so important for students to learn patterns?
I think it's important for students to learn patterns for two reasons. One is I've been doing that research looking at the Vygotsky kind of concepts, which is basically looking at building on prior knowledge. So there's no point laying a foundation for the student if we haven't got prior knowledge to build on. And so patterns provide the first of that foundation.
Okay. Who's the Vygotsky you've mentioned? Can you spell his name so we can look him up? Vygotsky. I have to write. I love how you're writing on your piano for those who aren't watching. She's writing it on the piano. Obviously a visual or kinesthetic learner of some sort.
I'm actually auditory, but Russian is not my first language. Yes, so he's one of many. Kodai did it instinctively with a lot of the stuff he did, but it's the current kind of thing that's driving education in schools, so it marries nicely with that. But I think it's just important that patterns are important because we get that pattern secure and then we can build the next pattern on that pattern. The other little discovery, I guess, that I made was that students were actually reading music by going T-I-M-T-O. So they were reading note by note. That's not how we read a word. We don't read a word note letter by letter. We read it as a whole thing. So when I saw that they were doing that, I started talking to them about what they were doing and then started looking at how we needed to transfer that into as many patterns that they could recognise. That meant that students who couldn't sight read before now can.
I've often mentioned this, that the most important thing for sight reading is to be able to recognise blocks, patterns, chunks of music, rather than have to read word to word, letter to letter.
Yep.
Absolutely. And it was interesting. I interviewed Neil Moore of Simply Music in our last episode number 49, and he was talking about how the brain is wired to find patterns. And it is, we recognise patterns when we see them. So if we're not helping our students put that into a musical context, I think we're missing out on a huge learning opportunity.
That's how we make sense of the world.
Okay, so we should probably talk about some examples of patterns in case people are going, I don't even know what a pattern is, or like, what is this? So can you give us some examples of a pattern? What's a rhythmic pattern? Maybe a melodic pattern?
All right. Well, one of the first things I do once they have the figure strength and agility, so they often can do it if they start learning as teenagers, is I teach them the triad, that triad pattern, and the chord. And you can do that in a variety of ways, or any combination of things. But I don't just do it on C. I then do D and then E, etc. Just white notes to get the 5-3-1 and the 1-3-5 in the right hand going. But just giving them like a kinetic, I call it a kinetic vocabulary, so that before I look at anything to read, they've got a knowledge of that. And it's easy then to explain what the chords are, get them to rearrange the chords and get just that triadic pattern going. And once they've got that, I then can introduce them to, say, the visual symbol of that.
Okay, I was going to ask, so you're not doing that by reading, you're just doing that by, here's a shape on the piano, this is what it looks like, this is what it sounds like.
Yep.
Let's explore it.
Okay, that's exactly right. I don't try and, if they're very, very gifted, I might say, can you find the note, play it? But usually I'm quite happy for them to watch and copy. And of course, some kids are very good at that and can do it very quickly and others not so. But the best thing is they actually go home and practice it. And that was something I meant to say before. One of the other things I think happens is because we don't use pattern as part of our teaching, and because we don't always build on what they already can do, they're in the lesson and they do it and they say, yes, I understand it, but then they go home and they can't. And then they come back and say, oh, I didn't do that because I forgot. And, actually what happened was they had nothing to link it to remember. Now, I actually relate to that because that was me with maths at high school. And now, now that I've been using this particular thing and started my research to back that up, it makes sense. And now that I'm doing that, I'm finding I might actually set maybe a little bit less for them to practice, but they do it because they're kind of addicted already because they want to get it right.
And we're going to see how you put some of these into a musical context later, which that's what I really enjoyed about your presentation. What about rhythmic patterns? Are they kind of getting kids to go da, 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 or clap, or what do you do?
What do? I do a lot of Kadai style stuff in terms of just echo clapping. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a real lack in their memory. And I don't move past certain points. So if they can't do absolutely accurate, no point going forward.
So give me a demo. I'm the student. You're the teacher. What would you get me to do?
Go. Okay, now if you were unable to do that, that accurately, I would stick with that vocabulary.
Until they get it.
That's right. But then I marry that with what's in their repertoire with rhythm drills. So I've got this starts here. I'll just show you.
Yeah.
Count. And so it starts when they're little, firefly, flying in the night. So they can use words.
Okay. And would you do that vocally with them?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got a bunch of singers that can't read that are wanting to learn that sort of thing, learning to read and be a bit more musically literate. The singing teacher here has sort of said, please do something, and they love actually saying it. Really helps them.
I think it does.
Yeah, I have a variety of strategies which probably every teacher uses. I use words, I use rhymes, I make up rhymes, I use the, Kadai, Ta, TTs, I use counting 1N, 2N. I get them to count while I clap. I count everything. Just a couple of minutes in the lesson doing that, maybe then doing it on the piano. And then over chords, depending on what else we're doing. But doing that, once that's really accurate, then just showing them those symbols and then getting to read those drills.
Yeah, absolutely.
No pitch, just the drills. This is in the beginning stages. When they're older, I put all of that together, of course.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say I've been having more and more success as part of my community, actually. A number of the members of my community have been really proactive in getting me to do more singing with my students.
Oh, very
Because I've kind of put up my hand and said, I wasn't asked to sing a whole lot during my lessons, I don't think. I hope my teacher isn't listening. And she's like, yes, you did. I don't remember doing it. I've got a good voice. I can sing. It's all fine. But I've never really pushed my kids to sing. And I teach a lot of teenage boys. So I've always been like, I don't think they'll really enjoy it. But the more I've done it and the more I've normalized it, and it's really only been this year that I've been doing it, the easier kids find playing things. I've had some real success with this. I've got to recommend it. If they're having trouble with a rhythm, I just get them, let's sing it, vocalize it in some way. It doesn't matter what syllable you use, just go da, 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 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Do you have the same?
Absolutely.
thing?
I always say to the students, it's my magic trick. It's my secret thing, and I can't explain how it works. But whether they're beginning or right up to their Elmas, once they sing it, they play it differently. Now, here's a couple of hints. I do teach a lot of boys too. And I find if I just make it non-negotiable and I just say, okay, we're going to sing this. If you don't want to sing, you can da. So I'll start singing and they'll be going da, da, da. And within that lesson or several weeks, they're in pitch.
Yeah.
And this is including the two boys whose parents said they can't sing because they inherited my voice.
That's helpful, isn't it?
So, I think that's, really important. Yesterday I had a little girl who's very shy and I said, okay, we're going to clap this. And she went, no. And I said, well, let's do fairy claps. And I did little invisible ones on her hand and that worked. And I did the same with the singing. Mm-hmm. I said, let's do fairy singing. So you just need to kind of think a little bit of, if they're resistant, of how to do it.
Yeah.
And always, can I just say to teachers out there, always sing with them.
Yes.
Always. And if they're having trouble pitching, they'll pitch to your voice before they'll pitch to the instrument.
Okay, that's interesting. I haven't sort of picked that up before.
Oh, it's absolutely true. And so,
just because of the timbre of the human voice, perhaps we're more matched to it. Yeah.
And that's a Kodai thing. If you do some research there, he found that out. I wish I could claim credit.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is that there's, for those doing AMEB or other exams where they've got those fairly esoteric exercises, there's no point just starting those there.
Because you mean the oral tests?
Yeah, they just give up before they start because they know they've got it wrong. It's too hard. If you don't lay this groundwork, you're going to be doing an uphill battle. But if you do lay this, like even from the 6-year-olds, play 2 notes, sing the low part with them, sing the high part, and then they just do it, and it's not an issue. So singing is absolutely the way to go.
I think, of course, one of the big problems we have here in Australia with regard to the exams is, of course, everyone's focus is on scales and pieces and not the oral work. And so this idea of pitch, recognition, listening, rhythm, all gets left to the couple of weeks before the exam, and it's always a disaster. Kids hate it, when it could actually be quite productive, and it is important. So that's why I think it's great that we're talking about it, because let's say, in fact, this could be my next question, I guess. Let's say I've got some students doing their grade 2 exam later in the year, and I'm listening to this podcast right now, and I understand this concept of patterns, but I don't know where I could start. I've never done it with my students before. So what would you suggest they do, let's say just in rhythm, to help them with that oral test that pretty much every exam board has, where a rhythm is played or a melody is played and you have to clap back a rhythm?
Okay, well, I think that I would start with, this is why I wrote I don't want to, ply my wares, but...
No, I'd like you to mention your books, because I've looked through them. I'm a big believer in them, and we've got a special offer to offer our listeners about them. So let's talk about them.
The reason I wrote them is because I kept having to write down little rhythms for them to clap, or for me to remember to clap. And because there was nothing, there's bits and pieces everywhere, but nothing sequential. So I started with, that basic pattern of the TTTV pattern, which is the easiest one. And I just basically wrote 40 pages for the basic beats, and that's with rhythms and rhymes. And then, so on the first page they can say it, on the second page it's just auditory. You clap it, they read it, whatever you want to do. And so that develops the memory and the pattern recognition. And then the next book's another 40. It's the next step. That's clap and count. And then Rhythm Rocks is the next one. And then Death by Rhythm is the next one. And then I've got Extreme Rhythm that I'm just about finished. And there's basically 1 page per week for 40 weeks of the year.
Okay, I'm losing you off the camera. Just watch out.
That is, I guess, me having done the work. If you want to just say, I want a sequential, secure, workable thing that builds in the right sequence for the students, rather than just random things. So once they get good at one pattern combination, then the next one comes in, and then the next. So by the time they're at, say, clap and count or Rhythm Rocks, they've got most of the things up to second grade: triplets, semiquavers, dotted quavers, semiquavers.
Yep.
So they've got all of that. And you can play them on a note, you can play them on a scale, you can clap them. I also have Ear Before Eye, which does the same thing, but it covers each aspect. So it has rhythm patterns, it has phrases, it has intervals, it has lower parts, it has everything. Again, instead of waiting until whatever grade it is that they, I think it's grade 3, they introduce the lower note. I have that starting when you start, and I show how to make it work so that by the time they need to sing a more complicated part, they're familiar with the intervals of the lower voice and they can just do it. And I know it works because it came out of my practice. Yeah.
And look, we're going to tell people where they can find your books, which are available for digital download towards the end. If teachers don't want to buy any books, totally fine. I guess the process would be to do some research into something like Kodai, Kodally, if you haven't heard about it, and have a look online. I'm sure there's some, introductory worksheets on rhythms that you could download.
Absolutely.
And I guess my approach has been, tell me if you think this is the right idea, with one of my beginners who I started this year, at some stage during lesson, I mix up lots of different activities on and off the bench. One of the activities we'll chant patterns at each other, or we'll clap patterns. Yeah. So I'll do something like you did before, but he repeats it, and then maybe he'll take the lead and I'll repeat it. Or we'll have a conversation. We'll not tap the same thing. We'll kind of converse. So I'll go, and he'll go, or something. I don't know. That's that kind of thing.
I think all of those are great, and you just need to keep varying them and experimenting with them. And you're right, there are some really good resources online to download, and I probably have bought nearly every single oral book there is in existence in an effort to find a cohesive. But what I wanted, this is why I wrote them, what I wanted was something that I didn't have to keep trolling through to find, that I could just go through.
Yep.
It was also, and I might mention, this might be something, it's easy for me to do at a conservatorium. I actually have music craft or musicianship classes. So all the oral theory, composition and stuff like that gets done in those classes, which frees up the lessons to just work on the other parts of your performance practice. So that's another reason those books are good, because we just rattle through one page per week, and that is brilliant. But there is no reason, if you're in private practice or even in a community, to get together with a couple of teachers and go, right, I'll do the rhythm unit, you do this, you do that, and you just say there's a lesson happening on this time, it's this much for the term, and have 5, probably up to 10 would be my maximum. Gets a bit unwieldy after that.
Yeah.
And just do these skills once a week that way.
Yep.
Because that's another option. And it's not an expensive option for parents, because you've got 10 in the class and it's, $8 a lesson or something.
And I think you're absolutely right with regard to online versus buying a book that's already been organised. You could find much of the stuff that's in your book, I would assume, if you trawled the internet for long enough and had a look through all the books. But, you can just go to someone like you who's put it all together and go, bang, there's a sequence learning series. And I also like the fact that your books go right up to what we call Year 12 in Australia. It's the final year of school kind of training.
Into first year uni.
Well, there you go, into first year uni. So I was actually all of the teachers, Jo, I've got to tell you a story. Jo was presenting at this conference and I was in the audience with there's probably about 30 teachers, and Jo made us, she popped a rhythm pattern on the board and got us to do a bar each as we went round the down the lines of people watching, and it was an utter disaster. It was so bad.
It wasn't even a hard one.
No, I know. I was so embarrassed because people, I don't know, people were half asleep probably. It was the first session in the morning, but it was enlightening.
They weren't able to come in on the beat, or they clapped it too fast or whatever. Yeah, they were pretty thrown. And
in the research I've done on the music learning theory, the idea is that there is no break in the pulse. So once a pulse is set, and the teacher, let's say they audiate the pattern, the students have to do it. Teacher will have their hands up like this, almost conducting, I think. I hope I'm not wrong in this, but they'll go do da da, and they'll conduct the class in, and they have to come in straight away, and just back and forward without losing a beat.
That's another thing that reminds me. Another important thing I think with all of this is to, I guess, milk the exercises until they're dry. So, for example, if you've got something very simple, this is just an audio cast, isn't it?
No, it's video and audio.
Okay, so I'll just see if you can pick this up. Say you have something simple like that. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay, the I'm a Little Teapot rhythm.
Yep.
Don't. Once they can do that accurately, there's still a lot more you can do. You can do what I did, which is passing it along like a relay race, but you can also put the metronome on and do it very quickly, moderately and very slowly, and show them how that changes. Because I don't know if you've experienced it, but as soon as my students that aren't well drilled or before I started doing this, see a joined pair of notes, they go, because they just think that's the quick bit. And it's a set speed for that. So they'll be going along and then they'll see a fast one and do that. And that's because they haven't really understood that it's not quick. It's just quicker in relation.
Yes.
But once you put those metronome pulses on it, you then get that problem solved. And it does take time, so you've got to do it a lot.
Yep, Marilyn Rowe was talking about that exactly in episode 48.
Oh, beautiful.
In regard to particularly dotted crotchet quaver.
Oh, always anticipate.
This kind of rhythm. And the fact that, that pattern can look different, but sound the same depending on the time signature, depending on the speed, all this kind of stuff. So you're absolutely right. That's why, again, drilling and doing it at different paces, speeds, tempos, I should say, is so important. Totally with you there.
In fact, the 40 pages I've got in each book could last many, many more, or even be once they're out of one book, you go back to the other and do it in a more complex way.
Yeah, that sounds good.
There's a lot of, don't be in a hurry for a lot of new material because it's just the more you use what they know in varied ways, the better they get at the pattern recognition because, again, you're using what they know, but you're helping them put it into new contexts.
Got it. Okay, so let's talk about melodic patterns. How do you approach this one?
Melodic patterns for the right, mainly right.
For right hand, let's talk about, yeah. So I guess melodies rather than bass lines.
Probably the standard way most people do. Again, building on the triad. So once they know that, they can usually recognise. I get them to practice recognising where that is in pieces. If a piece is using it either downwards or upwards, being able to go, oh, that's just the F chord. And even in inversion, if it's there like that, I'll say, okay, now think about this. Do you know what that chord is? Let's play around. And once they know that those notes are an F chord, they don't have any problem with that reading. So that's one thing. And then, of course, the steps, the line, space, line, steps. So the steps and skipping work very well. And then that combined with your patterns of scales and arpeggio or triadic movement covers most of what you're going to get happening.
In pieces, yeah.
That's right. And then what I always do, I usually start with bass lines because I find that works better. This is what I love because I haven't seen other people present about bass lines. I'm a massive fan of it. I talk about it in my pop piano teaching course because it's so crucial. Well, tell us about. I'm just going to turn my heater on. By the way, I'm starting to freeze. Melbourne's got down to below 10 degrees now. Hang on. I'm still listening. Okay, so I kind of started music rather late. And I had been improvising and writing music before I even went near a teacher. So I had all these really bad habits. But one of the good things that came out of it was I remember saying to the teacher, I don't want to do classical music, I only want to do popular. And she went, okay. And then I got so frustrated, she said, the only way you can get better at this is to do exams, which probably isn't true.
I'd say that's definitely not true.
Back then she was so far out of her comfort zone, but I did fall in love with classical music and I did do rigorous training there. But because of that, I think I always start with bass because one, it'll be the thing they forget about, the thing they ignore, and usually the weakest read. But if you get those patterns learnt first, that gives you the anchor of your music. And it's really the foundation. So I will tend to do you see a chord progression? Do you see that coming back? And once they've got that, they can kind of let that go a little bit because usually it does follow patterns. In the right hand, however, or predominantly melodic line is in the right hand. In that, however, I will always I do this funny thing when we're learning a new piece, and it's something I have to attribute Hamish Tate, the director. He's my boss here. He and I work together on a piano class every week. We kind of devised this together, so I can't just say it's my idea. But if they're learning a new piece, and this does take time, but the results are incredible because their reading is better, their practice is better, they go forward quicker. They're learning a new piece. We will sit and we'll basically analyse it before they touch it. Now, most people will clap the rhythm and they'll look at the key signature and that sort of thing, but we do more than that. We will look at the patterns. Okay, there's an ascending pattern. Is it anywhere else? Okay, let's find all those bars. Okay, oh, look, this looks the same. What's happening? Oh, it's up an octave. You know, those sorts of things. So we'll do all of that with each hand, and then playing it on our laps. Haven't touched the piano yet. Singing it, hearing where it is, clapping it. This is not in order, of course. This is just the things that we do. Usually clapping is early. As they clap it, they'll often start to hum, and you'll be surprised at how accurate they become so they're actually sight singing. And then, depending on the student, right, left hand from memory without having played it.
Yeah, it's
right. And then put it together. And then they go home, and what they do with the music is they use the music where they can't remember a link or dynamic or whatever. Now, that has revolutionised it for us. I supplement that then with easy pieces that use all the patterns in that piece.
Right, okay, yep.
Okay, so they are at the moment gleaned from a range of places, but they are going to be the formation of my thesis, because for my master's, I will be producing a body of work of piano stuff that will kind of revolutionise, I hope, how we do things, providing resources that teachers can just get a handle on and that are very cheap to get, you know.
Yeah, I can't wait to see this research.
Yeah,
Great. I was going to say, this sound, yeah, totally. It sounds, it's got some similarities with Paul Harris and his simultaneous. Have you heard of his simultaneous learning concept? Definitely look him up.
Oh, wow.
It's the same idea. He advocates taking the ingredients of pieces, which he calls, you know, the patterns, the rhythmic shapes, the keys, all the elements that are going to come up, drill them with the students, get them to write them, get them to read them, all this kind of stuff before they start learning a piece. Then they put the piece in front of them and they're like, oh, okay, that's that. Oh, yeah, easy, right? It's the same kind of approach. Why aren't we doing that more?
I'll tell you why. It does seem to take longer.
It does take longer. It takes more thought. You've got to prepare as well, right?
The kid has to think.
Yeah, but I think the teacher has to think
Well, that's true too, but the student has to really remember and think. So there's no rote memory. A lot of students like the idea of just playing it over and over and over and then they remember it because they don't think they're thinking.
Yeah.
Problem with that is they usually have mistakes. This method, you can actually play it without a mistake the very first time if they're thinking properly. So what you're doing is asking them to think, and varying degrees of success happen with that depending on the student.
Yeah,
okay.
It's great. You know, as you say, you're forcing them to think, prepare before they actually play it. So hopefully when they play it, they get it right. Bravo, we've got, you know, we're on the right track.
Yeah.
I don't want to, we're going to run out of time if we're not too careful. We could talk about this for ages, I know.
Yeah.
I just want to go back to left-hand patterns. Can you give us an example of some of the left-hand patterns that you use?
Okay, you were particularly interested in those bass lines, weren't you? Or...
Yeah, well, I'm interested. I mean, that's what I experienced you working with us on. But, you know, you might have other ones. I don't know if you teach kids what a tango pattern is or what a Alberti bass is.
That one there.
Just pull it back a bit. Yep, so it's called Making My Own Music.
Yeah, that one there is best as a teacher resource. Sorry, you can't see me. Students can get it, but it does end up being a better teacher resource. And in it, I break everything down for the teachers. So I have a lot of patterns. I have at the back, for example, over 50 ways to play a chord. And the idea is the teacher teaches that to the student orally, and they do it over different chords. So, for example, if they want to do this one, they could do it all white notes, up and back. They could do it all major, all minor, you know, all dominant sevenths, all major sevenths, and they get this whole thing. And every pattern can be done like that.
Yep.
And it could be, that kind of thing. So depending and the idea is there's even blank paces for them. I mean, I actually originally had 100, but I thought might be nice for the teachers and the students to come up with their own.
For sure. Yeah.
Rather than me just giving it all to them. And I've even got that for left and right hand fillers, that kind of thing. And then I broke down, I do have a tango-like pattern in the beginning where they can do, and
I just like tango patterns.
All sorts of things. But the idea is that the teacher doesn't just limit to the 4 or 5 I've got.
Okay, yeah. And then, so let's say they can do they learn that pattern.
Yep.
Do they then try and play something with their right hand with that or something?
I would start with, for example, in this book here, on page 11, I've got this, just blank stays with a chord above them.
Can you show us quickly?
Sure.
Okay, so we've got, that's like a lead sheet, isn't it?
A lead sheet.
With no melody.
That's no melody or bass, because I didn't want them being distracted by it.
Yeah.
And then I've got suggestions. Practice in block chords. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep it in root position at starters, but depending on what you're developing, they might be quite advanced, and you're going, everything's got to be in first inversion. Then it tells you what you can try, but one thing could be just octaves in the left hand, chords in the right. Okay, let's put the tango. Sorry. That kind of thing.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's exactly what I was actually just thinking in my head. How cool would it be if there was a book where there was like a list of patterns on one page and then a whole way of playing them on the other page? Right. And look, that sounds like what it is.
And then I did that with the jazz. A lot of kids like to do jazz.
There goes my next book idea. Thanks, Jo.
That's okay, Tim. We can put it together. But there's the jazz.
Just up a little. Up, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, so that's this one.
Yeah. So I just identified a few really common ones, and I gave them names so I could say, do this one, do that one. So that I called the boogie bass, obviously. This is the lazy bass.
Yeah.
And then you can put chords over the top of that. The blues bass I called. The rock blues bass I called it. Yeah. Western jazz bass I called this one.
Out along the country road.
Just a simple walking bass. That one. A vamp bass, just for crotchets to make a kind of an ostinato. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a rhythmic and melodic pattern.
Yep.
Yeah.
Boogie bass. Walking bass in quavers. Just that basic one to start with. And then a ragtime vamp. That kind of thing, which you can then change to octaves and whatever. But then what I do is they might practice, say, that lead sheet there.
Just up a bit again. Yep, cool. Okay, so again, lead sheet, just chord symbols with nothing written on the stave. Yeah.
So they might do... do that. And when they can do that and fiddle around and just put block chords, then I might say, okay, let's see which of the basses fit with this little blues and bass.
Okay, so now we've got a lead sheet with a melody. So you've got chords, melody, and you go, okay, well, you've learned a whole lot of left-hand patterns. Which one's going to work? That's
right.
Love it.
And I actually start with, can you read it with the block chords together? it's very simple. Okay, so once they could do that, then I say, okay, what one's going to work? Now, some kids will have to try it out, but the smart ones will go it's got an E flat going to an E natural. So the best one will be, because you don't get the clash.
Yeah.
Right? And then they put that together. You can even just get one kid to do it and another kid to do something else.
Love it. Yeah. Could definitely work in group lessons too.
And so that's the book, and it's got a few examples for students, but it wasn't enough. So I wrote, because it's hard to get the right music that's legal. So I just wrote this sort of thing.
Oh yeah. Okay. So this is a disco piece now.
Yeah. So this is in the anthology.
Right. Yep.
And you can download these pieces individually. Okay. So disco, it might be, but then you can say, let's try some of the other patterns, etc. But the one on the previous page,
so all you're giving on the music is the chord and the melody, right? Yeah. So this, I love this because it's so creative and it's so musical. The students have to listen to what they're doing, have to go, oh, does this sound right now? It gives them ownership of what they're doing. I think it's great. I can't wait to try this out.
And it also gets them reading their right hand really well. But the other thing you can do, see that one I showed you that one because it was more of a ballad style, so they can use their broken chords. But then you can say, hey, what about that new piece of Mozart you're doing? Why don't we try making it like an Alberti bass? And so they're taking it out of context, using it somewhere else and solving problems that, maybe you can't. You know how often they'll have a problem that you can't solve, but you put it somewhere else, fix it and put it back in and it's,
And that's the important sort of making connections, which I think is vital for effective piano teaching. Yeah, making connections with things they know, other things they're learning, things they're listening to on the radio.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And this tries to mock that. And it has quite
I think you mean replicate or copy, not mock.
Mock.
No, do you? Okay.
Copy in a fun way. No, replicate.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But, because it's got jazzy ones and it's got like kind of, vampy ones. Those sorts of things for kids. It's got a whole range of things that they'll go, oh, that sounds a bit like. And I also put suggestions of what you can do if you're really stumped. But what you'll find is you and the student will just come up with new ideas all the time. And
so what would you say to teachers who are like, oh, I've only got 30 minutes with my students, they've got an exam in November, I can't do this. It's too hard. It takes too much time.
Well, I think that if the student is so focused and so motivated to do that exam and everyone's happy and the student is playing and reading and functioning as a musician, well, fine. My experience would tend to say that that's rare because if you're only doing that, one of two things happens. They often will be able to do their exam pieces, but not much else, or they will hate it and quit. But there are students where, they really are focused. And I do have some like that doing AMUS, but even them I'll say, like I play at church, for example, and I'll say, here's our latest song. Why don't you try and play it? And, of course, at church you only get a lead sheet.
Yeah, that's right.
So, just for something, let's do something fun. And so I tend to find that it's just important to make sure that music stays really relevant and that they can function. And so I guess I'd say to teachers, you need to think about what you want for your student, but you also need to maybe discuss with them what they want. What do they want? Do they want to be able to sit down and read perfectly a Bartók concerto? Do they want to be able to sit down and read a popular chart? There are very highly trained classical musicians who can't read a popular chart well. Is that what the student wants? Is that what, and if they say, yeah, no, I don't want to do this, then fine. But if they say, no, I want to do everything, then maybe it's time to think about how you could incorporate that.
Yeah, and I think we have to ask ourselves, what do we feel is important for our students to be able to do? Because sometimes they won't necessarily articulate it. If they know nothing other than learning exam pieces, they won't know that there are alternatives out there.
That's exactly right.
And my point would be the fact that I want to build musicians who love music all life, as I know you do. I want them to keep playing after they've finished school. Yes. I want them to be able to accompany a happy birthday. I want them to play for carols, play for their church, play for school, accompany musicians. They can't do that by just reading music.
Hear a piece of music on the radio and figure it out.
Exactly. It's all that. That's
they want to.
That's what's important
whether it's
for me.
Classical or not. And I guess the other thing I'd say is, if they're doing an exam in November and you've only got 30 minutes, one, what grade is it? Because if it's above 4th grade, it should be 45 minutes. And if it's above 6th grade, it should be 60. Mm. 2, it's August. I would be thinking that their pieces need to be learnt sooner. And 3, what I do find is if I match these improvisation pieces to something like what they're learning, they will go to the piano and play that. And then once they're there, they'll often play the other things they need to do.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, I think it's a win-win.
Mm. And if you make those connections to the pieces they are learning, then it should be helpful, not a hindrance.
Yeah.
So I'd look at any of this kind of creative teaching as something that is not wasting time or taking time away from the important things. It is the important things.
It is. It really is. It really is. And I think that often exams are used as a motivator, like that's how, the fear thing. But, I've got friends who say, quite honestly, when I learnt piano, I did nothing and then I'd find out it was 4 weeks till the exam and I'd cram. We know better now. Mm. Why don't students practice? There's another thesis, which I wouldn't mind doing, but I don't have time. But I think we all know, and I think there's a few reasons. One is they actually don't know what to do, and we've talked about that with patterns and with preparing their practice better. 2, they're too busy. Now, that's something that we can't control, and we need to have conversations with them and their parents about. Mm. Or 3, then it's too hard and they're not interested because it's too hard. Mm. I remember students that when I first started out saying, oh, I hate this bit, I hardly practice at all because I've got to learn the right hand then the left hand and I hate reading, but once I can play it, I love it. Well, that means you're going to spend at least a term where the student doesn't do anything because they're not at a place where they love it. So cut to the chase and go back and give them things they can do straight away and make smaller building blocks to get to that place.
Mm. Yep.
So that would be my thing, because mostly once they can do it a bit, you can't keep them away from it.
Yep. It's empowering, isn't it?
Even in a lesson, I'll give a student just a reading exercise like we talked about with the patterns, and I'll know that it's going to go home with them. Oops, sorry.
No, you're still there.
I'll know that it's going to go home with them. I don't know how to get back onto full.
No, it's all right. I can still see you. We've got to wrap it up in a minute anyway. So.
Okay. Sorry, something just interrupted.
That's okay.
I was saying that I know that it'll go home because they'll go, oh, can I do it again?
Yeah.
Like, okay. Can I do it one more time? And it's like, well, you did play it very well. Oh, but I want to do, because they got it right with one mistake the first time. That's not too much. But when they can't even hardly do it, that that's not going to be a positive thing at home.
Yep.
So I think there's those 3 things that you can talk about in terms of practice and exams, and that would be helpful.
Mm. Well, look, as much as I'd love to keep talking, we're going to have to wrap it up. We're almost at an hour. It's gone like this, as always, when I talk to people who share our similar ideas and things. It's been fantastic, Jo. So we better tell people, where can they go to find out more about you firstly, and then your music?
Okay, so I am on two websites. One is the Riverina Conservatorium of Music website. If you Google Riverina Conservatorium of Music Wagga Wagga, that will,
Yes,
yes.
everyone in the States is going, Wagga Wagga, you Australians
Yes,
are
you've
crazy.
actually been there, Tim.
I know,
So
it's a
look,
beautiful
and
place.
you may even be coming back.
That's
Yes,
it.
so that would be one place, and the other is the Wirrapeng. If you just Google Wirrapeng Australian music, then I'll be on that website, and all the digital downloads, etc., will be there as well.
Yep. Wirrapang, Wirapang. And in the show notes for today's episode, we will put links to the books, the URLs where you can download these books that Joe has been talking about. And they are all very kindly, on behalf of Wirrapang, who is the publisher, listed at 25% off. So the price that you see there on the website for download is 25% off. Thank you very much to Joe for letting us do that.
Sure.
That's great. And I hope some teachers will take advantage of that. That will be available for, I think, a few weeks anyway. I haven't got the final date set, but this will be going live around the middle of July. So you'll have most of July, if you're listening to this at that time, to check them out. If not, they'll still be up there. They just might not be the discount price. So, Joe, is there anything that you're just itching to say that we haven't commented on today, or was that a pretty good summary?
Tim, it was a great summary, and the thing I'm itching to say is thank you so much for the opportunity. Wonderful to chat. I just get such a buzz out of talking to other teachers who are experimenting and finding the same things that I'm finding, and the little different angles that you find, and then you can add that to what you know. So it's just an absolute thrill to be talking about all these things with you and being on the same page.
Yeah, it's great. Agreed. And thank you very much for sharing your time with us today and your resources. I can't wait to look at them myself. I grabbed a couple of copies when I was up there at the conference. So I'm going to try it out. I've got a couple of students actually who I think this is going to work really well with. So maybe we'll have to get you back on to do a bit of a summary when I've tried them out and we can chat more.
Well, you're definitely going to have to come to APPC in Adelaide so I can get you to show me what sort of things you found.
Actually, yeah, that's right. We were talking maybe we should do a combined thing, weren't we?
That would be brilliant.
Yeah.
I think we could do some pretty amazing stuff.
That's the Australian Piano Pedagogy Conference or Convention, which is in Adelaide in July next year, 2017. Right. For those who are looking to come along, more information about that will be up soon.
We have had people from the US and the UK come, so you're totally welcome.
Absolutely, yeah. All right, Joe, I think we better sign off there. Thank you so much again for your time, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
All right, bye.
If the idea of a piano teachers community where you get to access the best educational resources, rub shoulders with expert teachers from around the world, and have immediate access to feedback for any of your questions, then InnerCircle membership is for you. The InnerCircle is my private community of piano teachers from across the globe who share a commitment to creating and delivering the most inspiring, modern and progressive learning experiences for their students. Membership is now open, so head to timtopham.com/community to find out more and get involved today. I can't wait to see you on the inside.